Hey, happy Wednesday, everyone. Um, it's good to see you or see some of y'all, but see the names pop up that I see often in Slack. I just want to get a temperature, like a pulse check. How is everyone doing with this week's challenge? Does anyone have any comments or any milestones? Thank you, Natalie. Natalie's like, yes. Does anyone have any comments or anything that they want to share? Any milestones that have happened in the course of this challenge that anyone wants to speak to? No, a little shy. All right, that's cool.
Participation points. Come on, guys. Okay,
Just know, yeah.
do you want to call people out? Should
Oh
we? Should
no.
we? Are you guys gonna force me to do this? Don't make me be
Oh.
that person.
I will say this, that everybody is in. Oh, okay. Lauren says that you find that, yes, and it's supposed to. So the pyramid workout is going to be challenging. That's why I made baby or mini pyramids, so that it could be a little bit more approachable and digestible. Um, the pyramid workout is one of my favorites, but it's also one of the hardest. Like I groan whenever it comes up in my training program when I train. But I really enjoy it because every time you approach it, you're going to be faster. You're going to approach it differently. You're going to breathe through it differently. It is to challenge you. I think anything that you're using your body and obviously your mind, you're going to challenge yourself. It's going to be hard. And sometimes we don't do things because it's so easy. We do things to challenge ourselves and to get out of our comfort zone. So if you feel like the full pyramid is too much, try just cutting it in half and approaching it that way. And then come back to it next week and see if maybe doing that mini again and see how you feel about that. And maybe in the final week when you do the pyramid, and if you want to do the full pyramid, then that's something you can try and challenge yourself. But everything is meant to be challenged, is meant to challenge you just a little bit. So that's a good statement because yeah,
Mm-hmm.
the mini pyramid, super excited. Yeah, I Hannah, yes, and you've inspired me to create this mini version. So I'm really glad that you approached it the first week. And like anything, if this was your first week to run a mile for the first time in a while, I don't know if you've attempted to run another mile since then, um, maybe it's been a little bit easier the second time or even the third time. And I mentioned this last week. Just know that like your first attempt at something may not be the best and it can be a little frustrating. But if you have a little bit of patience and grace with yourself, then just know that you're not going to be the best, but it will get better over time. And that mile is going to feel a little bit easier. 3 miles is going to feel a little bit easier. And then that's how we continuously better ourselves. We all start from the same place. So when people speak up and say like, hey, I did my first mile in the first time and I did it in 13 minutes, that's all great because we've all been there at some point before. So there's no shame, there's no need to be afraid of not wanting to speak up because we're all here to cheer each other along this course.
Just curious. Has How many of you are in a group or doing this by yourself? And you can just type it on the chat if you don't want to like raise your hand visually, but solo, group. Okay. Awesome. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Seeing all the chats. See a lot of solo runners on here.
Yeah, so what's really great is about this community is, like I said, we have Slack, even though we can't convene and meet together physically in person. We can use Slack to cheer each other on or to ask questions, as I see some of you guys doing. So what's really great about having Greg on this call this week is because, so I'm a transplant. I moved to San Diego almost 5 years ago. And I moved here And immediately I wanted to find my community of runners. And for me, like, I've lived in Chicago before, I've lived in New York City, and in those places I found community. And you may not know anyone when you walk into a running store, but you know that there is some commonality there. Like the person who's behind the desk is a runner, or should be a runner, but is a runner, and they understand what your goals are, what makes you happy, you know, why you're in there. And then there is where you ask the questions of like, where can I find a run club? Where can I find other people to meet in a group? And that's where like community and run stores, that goes hand in hand. So when I met Greg, I met him at Milestone in North Park on Wednesdays before COVID. Greg hosts a like the best run club in San Diego. It draws over 150 people, and these are 150 runners, walkers, newbies, experts, professionals, everything in between. And everybody comes to Milestone for community. And so from there, that's where I've met a lot of my best friends. I've had a lot of really great experiences through Milestone. Greg and I, like Greg's like one of my best homies here in San Diego. Yeah, exactly. So I am so happy to introduce to you all Greg, because Greg is, you know, he's a Southern Californian. He has created something, he has built community. He understands run from so many perspectives. So Greg, I'm going to allow you to introduce yourself to these awesome students here.
Hey, my name is Greg Lemon, and I'm one of the, I guess, co-founder sounds weird, sounds like a tech company, but I'm one of the co-owners of Milestone Running, and we are an actual physical brick and mortar store in North Park, and then we recently opened up one in Pacific Beach. And pretty much what we do is sell like running gear and like shoes, apparel, accessories, watches, casual, comfy clothes, things that we just like to wear because it's comfortable. We'll sell it just because we can. But yeah, we started back in 2013, myself and my business partner, Chad. And then we slowly started to add employees, Julie being our first. And now since she's amazing and helped us big time, she's actually a business partner. So there's three of us. And through the store, we kind of, what Iman was speaking to, kind of built a community. And I think that was part of the main goals with the store, and not just for like profit, but just like, how do we ingrain ourselves, how to make a difference in San Diego? And so through the running store, or through the run group, is what we did. And so we started our Wednesday night run group. And like Iman was saying, it's like 100 to 150 people, but it's like super, super casual. So it's one of those things where like, if you guys are new to running, or you have been running for a long time, I think kind of getting involved in some kind of run group, whether it's ours or a different trail group. Obviously, if you go through Iman's app, there's a ton of different groups you can on the rundown. There's seriously a ton of run groups. Ours is the best. No, I'm just kidding. But I encourage you to come to ours. It's when it starts happening, it's so much fun. And we just do 3 to 5 mile runs. And it's pretty much all levels. And we'll get people who come in and they've only ran like a mile in their life. And they're like, they hear me say like, all right, we're doing 3 to 5 miles. And I'll look at their face like, oh God, I can't run that. And I'm like, hey, you run as far as you want. You can walk, you can jog. So it's really about just getting people to come together and like, just kind of be a part of something. And just meet random people. So yeah, I don't know. Do you want me to talk about shoes and stuff, or?
Yeah. So we're gonna start started off with Greg just kind of talking about the process, you know, of like buying shoes, being fitted. When you walk into a running store, you know, there's just sometimes people who've never been to a running store before, they're just like, I didn't even know this existed. Like, what is, you know, and then we ask them a question like, do you want to be fitted? I'm like, I don't know what that means. So Greg, when you guys do walk into a run specialty store, then you'll have the knowledge and the education now. So Greg, lead us into the process.
Cool.
How do you
first thing, I think it's the the younger generation in particular is amazing because they do a lot of research before they go into anything. And sometimes to a fault, but I think it's like awesome when kids come in here or just people. I'm a kid too. I guess I would consider myself.
We're not that old. Greg. You seriously sound like a dad right now. We are the same age and we're not that old. I just need to clarify this.
I'm a millennial, firm in the middle. But anyone that's younger than me or my age, we do a lot of research before we go in, which is really good. And but sometimes people will come in and they'll have a lot of misinformation that just like anything you can find on the internet. So I do think it's important that when it's your first, when you're buying gear, it's important to kind of go in and speak to someone that's like ran in it, someone that actually has like, I don't know, put some miles into anything, or spoke to, like, we work with a lot of physical therapists and doctors. And so not only are we like knowledgeable about like all the technology and all this gear, but also like running injuries, body mechanics. And so there's so much more that we can provide than just like shoes and just being like, hey, choose the prettiest one off the wall, you know? So I do think for anyone, it's super important to kind of come in, try on shoes. I don't know, I can't stress that enough. And by doing that, it's really, you want to go into a run specialty store. Although Dick's Sporting Goods does sell like good quality stuff, not always are the people there as well informed of like what the technology shoe and what will kind of help you with what's going on with your body. So first, I think that's super important to know that like a run specialty, oddly enough, does exist, and they are super important to keeping you kind of healthy and just enjoying it. I'll say a lot of people, including myself, when I first started running, were kind of just thinking like pain is part of the process, whether it's like blisters or blackened toenails and all these different things. And then like finally I was like, learned running stores existed like way late into my life. And I was like, oh, I shouldn't have blood blisters. Oh, like I shouldn't wear cotton, and like all these different things. And so just getting to talk to someone face to face, it makes a big difference. But I guess I'll start you off with kind of like the fitting process and what we do and what we're looking for. So when you come into a running store, typically we're going to ask you a ton of questions, and you're going to be like, why is this person prying in on my life? And we are. And but we kind of want to know like your running history. What are your goals? Are you dealing with any kind of injuries, whether it's like shin splints and blisters or whatever? And then things that you've worn in the past. And then we'll kind of help steer you in the right direction just off that simple baseline. Sizing is a big thing right off the bat. So we always like to measure your feet. Things that people don't know is usually you want to go up a half to a full size from what you actually measure at. So yes, you will be wearing a shoe that is bigger. What I always tell people is like, I used to play soccer, and I wear 10 and a half of my soccer cleats. My casual shoes I wear an 11, and then in my running shoes I wear a 12 and a 12 and a half. And it's just because when you're running, whether especially in San Diego, when it is hot outside, your feet will swell up, they will expand. Also at the same time, these are your toes. Every time you take a step, they splay, and you want to allow that to happen. It's very natural, so you want to allow that to happen. A lot of us, and we'll pretend like this is a bunion. It's like when your bone sticks out a little bit. A lot of us get bunions, and it's because all of our shoes are so pointed. So the best thing you can do for yourself is go up a little bit in space so that your toes can splay. And if you do have a bunion, which most of us do, just remember a little bit of extra room goes a long way. So what we'll do is we'll measure feet, grab you a single shoe, usually a very simple running shoe. Let's see, my shoe wall right here, mostly trail shoes. I'll grab you a Saucony. I'll grab you this one because it's kind of cool. So this would be considered a neutral running shoe, which means it doesn't have any kind of corrective support. And what we'll do is we'll watch you jog with this. And then from there, we'll kind of see whether you are rolling inward, which is when your arches kind of collapse in, or ankles, arches, ankles, whether neutral, which is when everything aligns up perfectly, or whether you supinate, it's when you wear out. Typically, the bottom of your shoe will wear it on the outside. For anyone, if you wanted like a simple way to look at what kind of support you may or may not need, you can always just look at the bottom of your athletic shoes and you will kind of see. So ideally, your shoes will wear out right down the middle. If you supinate, they'll wear it on the outside. And if you overpronate and need more support, it will wear out on the inside. The big thing is if you supinate, unfortunately, there's not really anything you can do. Just kind of deal with it. A lot of us do it. The only downside is that you will have to replace your shoes a little bit quicker because it's not going to change anything for you mechanically. If you overpronate, and that's when you roll inward, that's when you can run into a ton of different issues where your ankles will rotate in, your knees can rotate in, your hips can rotate in. It can kind of just really cause like a ripple effect of issues. So a lot of anterior knee issues, shin splints, calf stuff. That's very, very common. And it's kind of why our industry exists. It is really just to kind of prevent people from getting injured and trying to make running as comfortable as possible. So once we take a little bit of video or watch you run outside, whatever you feel comfortable with, we will kind of just bring you like a slew of shoes, and you'll go down, and it's kind of like Goldilocks, and you'll just kind of be like, this one's too hot, this one's too cold. And you'll kind of go through it, or like an eye exam, and you're just kind of testing the waters to kind of see which one fits the best. And truly, and this is always a weird thing for me to say because it kind of debunks everything that we do in the running industry. But studies have shown over and over that if people choose based off of what feels the most comfortable, that person is most likely to stay the healthiest. So you can go through all the shoes, you can read reviews, you can try on stuff that your friends recommend. But if you go purely based off of comfort, most likely you'll be the healthiest. So kind of keep that in mind, and don't go based off of colors and all that kind of stuff, although it is a little important, but staying healthy is way more important. And we'll see it all the time. I'm also guilty of it still. I tell myself, I'm like, no, I know that shoe's not good for me, but it's so pretty. I'll put it on and I'll mess up my feet, and I'll tell myself I knew better. But
hey, Greg, I have a question for you.
yeah.
On the chat, Lana says, if you're running the trails from Pavement, so from 2 trails from Pavement, should you wear trail shoes, or are you fine with just your road shoes?
That's a good question. So in San Diego, luckily for us, most of our trails are pretty manicured. So a lot of times you can transition smoothly with a road shoe onto trails. With that being said, you'll kind of just want to make sure that if you have a road shoe, that it has a full rubber outsole. So you can see this blue part is all rubber and this white is all like foam. So a lot of shoe companies, to like eliminate weight, they'll make everything on the bottom foam, and that will not transition well. It'll be slick. You'll kind of ruin the bottom of the shoes very quickly. So kind of pay attention to that, because having a rubber outsole is going to be very important. At the same time too, there are like hybrids. So this shoe I grabbed you, good aggressive tread, but it's also like nothing too grippy. So that this is like a great trend, like at our store, not to like pitch us too much, but like we sell a very large amount of like hybrid shoes, which are trail shoes that transition very smoothly onto the road. And for us out here in San Diego, a lot of us are fortunate enough where if you live in La Jolla, you live in North Park, you live in Mission Valley, you can actually like run to trails from the road or for where you live. And so having a shoe that's like a hybrid is super beneficial. Downside to trail shoes, a little bit heavier, a little bit more rigid. But we kind of try to do a really good job of keeping a good balance of like more roady trail shoes or more traily trail shoes. Very scientific terms.
Hey, Greg. So last week we had a workshop with Dr. Arson, and he mentioned like don't walk or do other sports in your run shoes. Because do you agree with that statements?
Okay.
Oh, here we go. Here's the.
Do what I say. Yeah, for sure. That is definitely. So I'll say. Last night I played basketball in my running shoes. Confession, I did. Okay.
Okay.
It wasn't terrible, but I definitely don't recommend it. I would say the one sport in particular that you never want to play in with your running shoes is like tennis or any kind of court shoe. And it's more so because when you swing and you follow through, you drag the top of your foot, and that will just like rip off the front of the shoe. So for sure, don't do any kind of court sports. And try to avoid. So running is a very linear sport. So running shoes don't have much support on the side. Cross trainers will, but running shoes do not have like leather straps or anything like that. So if you play a sport that has a lot of side to side movement, a lot of times like you can either roll your ankle, you'll come out through the side of the shoe. So it's not going to benefit you to wear a running shoe. Obviously that's hard to say. And I will say I do use my running shoes as basketball shoes, but I don't recommend that.
This could be a good question to ask that has been on one of the lists is, how long then should you keep your shoes? Because I would recommend that, like, if you want to preserve your shoes, then don't use your shoes for other activities, you know, like
100% right. Yeah.
that, like, we have the benefit of the luxury of like being seated shoes, so we're like, you know, whatever. But like, if you have limited number of shoes in your closet, then, you know, keep your running shoes your running shoes. So with that question, then how long should one keep their shoes?
All right. So typically, if you're keeping track of miles, and granted, this will change from shoe to shoe or brand to brand, because some shoes will definitely, you can get upwards of like 700 to 800 miles out of them. Most running shoes are probably going to get 400 to 500. And that's if you kept track of your mileage. Keep in mind that when you are running, let's say you're running 5 miles and it takes you 50 minutes. You're only in those shoes for 50 minutes. But if you're walking 5 miles, you're in those shoes for 2.5 hours, you know? So time on your feet is actually going to break down the shoes a little bit more. And it's also like, we have people that are like super light, Iman is a great example. She's super light on her feet. So her shoes are going to last her a lot longer than most of us. I kind of like stomp around, so my shoes don't last as long.
Hello.
So,
sorry, I'm in Zoom. What's that?
So you'll just kind of want to make sure that, I'll say the best way to keep track, or not even keep track, but just know when your shoes are done, is if you start to get weird aches and pains that you're not used to. So a lot of times you'll get a shoe, like an example, a guy came in today and he was like, I'm starting to get like knee pain and my arches hurt. He's like, I must need more support or everything like that. And, but really it was just, I was like, how long have you had your shoes? He's like, oh, like, usually I keep them for like 5 years. I'm like, well, how long have you had the arch pain? He's like, oh, like 3.5. And I'm like, well, your shoes are dead. So he probably should have replaced them like 3.5 years ago. Once you start getting that weird pain, is always a good sign, time to replace.
Hannah's saying, you know, like with regards to aches and pains, I put out a question. Does anyone have like these aches and pains that you're referring to, and where are they feeling them? So Hannah mentioned that she has them in her ankles and knees, and Lana says she always has pain. So can you speak a little bit about that?
Pain is gain. No, I'm just kidding. That's so Lana, I would definitely recommend coming to a store, kind of explain what's going on, because like pain can mean a lot of different things, but if you're always in pain, like that shouldn't happen. So I feel very confident that we'd at least be able to minimize that or make things a lot easier for you, because running should be pretty pain-free unless you are doing like a tough workout or something like that, or if you're like new to running, but it should be pretty painless. In terms of knee pain's a little bit tricky, but the knees, they're the worst part of the body. So for us, if it's like the exterior of the knees, usually that is going to be hip and glute related. If it's the very front of the knees, a lot of times it's actually like your quads could be super tight, or it could be like a strength discrepancy between your quads and your hamstrings. And if it's in the interior, a lot of times it just means you need a little bit more support, which also that would come from your shoes. Ankles could be a little bit tricky. Ankles could a lot of times are like the last sign, especially if it's like the outside of your ankles and like moving to the outside of your feet. That's usually the last sign that your hips are super, super tight. The body is a system of chains. And so usually you can kind of track like what is going on and where it's coming from. But again, like if you can, or maybe you could send us an email too. Like our email is just milestonerunning@gmail.com, and I'm gladly would answer some questions for you. But it's always a tricky thing. It could be a number of things.
I would like to also say that like whenever I hear that people have pain, I always just say like, first attempt, see if it's your shoes. Mm-hmm. Because I have a friend, Brady, who every single year he attempts to train and then he's always injured, always. Mm-hmm. And then he comes in and then he gets these shoes. And then I was like, so what's your size? And then he was like fumbling. I was like, I am pretty sure you're wearing the wrong size. He was wearing a size and a half smaller than what he ought to have been. And the thing is that like he always thought that like whatever he was feeling in his feet is what running in shoes is supposed to feel like. So he never really thought that would be a thing. And this is a grown person, grown person who who you would think he would know his shoe size, but has just been like stuck in this one frame of time and not realizing that his feet have actually been changing. So it always helps to know like just basics, like, am I wearing the right shoe size? And just going from there, like eliminating what certain things are. And then after he was placed in the right size shoe, then he wasn't feeling those aches and pains anymore. So it's a
I
good
agree with
place.
you. And I'm like, there is such a difference between like joint pain and then just like, okay, this sucks and my body's still warming up. There's a different kind of pain. If it's a sharp pain, you need to stop. And you know, like don't force it, don't push it. So just be careful because the runners that try to push through pain like that, they end up injuring themselves and then they're out for weeks. A run, I mean, like, and I'm sure Iman and Greg have had experience with some run injuries, you know, and how long the recovery takes. It is much longer than you want it to be, especially if you are in like go mode and you're trying to train for something. And for those of you that don't know what training, because like, we're using race terms and not everyone races. So when we say train, like there's people that sign up for like half marathons or 5Ks, or maybe you have a goal in mind and then you train to work your way up to there. Or if you're trying to do a triathlon, you train for weeks before you get up to there. Nobody just, well, you can, I guess, just jump into a marathon if you really wanted to, but you would be hurting and potentially injured if you do that. So that's what training means. So awesome. There's some questions on here. Should our running shoes be thicker on the midsole, outsole, shank, etc.? Greg.
So I'll say this, like, it's totally a preference, you know. Obviously there's a big minimal movement that happened, especially when the book Born to Run kind of came out. And so there's a lot of people who just run in a barefoot style shoe, or even some people who run barefoot. And then there's been this big push for max cushion shoes. So you can see this is like super, super cushioned. But just to kind of simplify things and what like minimal and I guess maximal means now in terms of running. So think of this is your foot. If it's completely flat and you have no shoes underneath, it's considered a zero drop. And then each millimeter raises the heel. So traditional running shoes, I'll use like Nike Pegasus, which is one of the original like running shoes, has a 12 millimeter offset. So it has a 12 millimeter heel. So now a lot of the companies are kind of bringing it down a little bit and going to like 4 to 6 millimeters and still considering that a barefoot style shoe or a minimal style shoe, despite it having a ton of cushion. And I'll use this shoe as an example. This shoe is completely flat as if you're barefoot. So the same amount of cushion all the way through the shoe sole and the midsole. But obviously tons and tons of cushion. So this is kind of the new direction and like what a minimal shoe now means versus like your traditional running shoe. And it is totally a preference. Obviously we weren't born with shoes on or high heels, but we've been so accustomed to using shoes with heels now that oddly enough, like women in particular have shorter Achilles. So going to like a minimal style shoe is not like for everyone. And it takes a lot of time. And we see a lot of injuries from people just kind of jumping into a minimal style shoe, where it's just like, we highly recommend that you just kind of ease your way into it because it'll take a toll on your body. And some people are really lucky and they can just kind of deal with not really having any kind of aches and pains. But like, I mean, for me, I'll be like, I love the idea of a zero drop shoe, but I don't have the patience and the time to like train my body into a zero drop shoe. So I kind of stay within the sweet spot for me is like 4 to 6, but
Hey,
it's totally a
Greg.
preference.
So Millie had this question at our meeting yesterday. Millie, do you want to ask your question? Because she's been always curious about these types of runners.
Okay, yeah. So my question is, what is the purpose of those like kind of barefoot toe shoes where it's like, yeah.
So it's like literally to mimic barefoot running and to allow your toes to splay, because that is like the biggest thing. And they are ugly, and honestly, they all stink. They all smell so bad. But like allowing your toes to do this is huge, and no matter what, like that is going to be super beneficial, because so many shoes are And I'll kind of show you a great example. And it's that same brand, Ultra, and I'll use a Nike actually. So you can see how that's like foot shaped. And this is kind of the same idea now of those like 5-finger shoes, the Vibrams, but then it's not like, it's aesthetically looks like a normal shoe, but it's just foot shaped. Whereas like a typical Nike is like very pointed at the very tip. And this is what your most shoes look like. But realistically, like no one's foot is shaped like that, and it shouldn't be. And if it is, it's because of all the shoes that we've been wearing our whole lives. So it's definitely a benefit to it. The hard part is like we're walking on pavement, so wearing that minimal of a shoe on pavement can kind of potentially, I don't know, be damaging in the long run.
Yeah, I
Ended.
like Julie likes to take off her shoes like after a workout. She'll run in the grass. You know, like there's a time and place to run barefoot, and there's nothing wrong with running barefoot. But you know, like whenever I've seen people run barefoot long distances on concrete because they've read this book, Born to Run, which I highly recommend people reading because it's a really good anthology of, or not anthology, it's like anthropologically. Christopher McDougall explains like how we were naturally born to run. Our survival is because of running, not because we're the fastest and not because we're the strongest. It's because we have the endurance to be able to hunt our, our food. So we have the pituitary glands to be able to sweat, whereas the animals can't sweat. So we run them through exhaustion. And so through that running, through that distance, we're able to evolve and stay alive because of that. But it's a really good book. But because of that book, a lot of people were like, oh, well, if my ancestors ran barefoot, I'm gonna run barefoot, but our ancestors didn't run on concrete and asphalt. So that's where a lot of these injuries have come about. And, just use
Great facts. Iman, thanks for sharing that. Really quick question about budget for quality shoes, Greg.
So typically, like if you were to get a brand new shoe, $100 is kind of going to be the starting price point. 120, 130 will be average. 150 and above will kind of be like a high-end shoe. Sometimes you'll get lucky too. Like you'll find a great shoe that you really like and you'll be able to find the previous model for a discounted price and like go for it. They do change every single year. And the companies say that they are trying to just improve whatever mistakes they may have made or whatever. But a lot of times you can find the previous model and it'll be solid. I'll say the biggest thing that we see is like someone will come in here. I'll say two things about Nike. Nike does make amazing running shoes, but they make a lot of price point shoes. And so because of that, a lot of times people will come in and they'll have like, oh, I have these, I bought these and they said Nike Running, but it'll be like Roshi's. And Roshi's is like truly like a casual shoe. So Nike, because of their like name, they'll put running on so many things that are not meant to run in. So it is important to kind of go into a running store so you can see like what is sold. What we sell here in our store cannot be sold at like a Foot Locker. Dick's Sporting Goods can sell a few of the things, but for the most part, it's separate. So a lot of the companies will keep their run specialty gear completely separate than all other industries. So that's one of the things that's like super important to be able to discern like the difference between a running shoe and a non-running shoe.
An athletic looking shoe.
Athletic, yeah. And it's tough too, because like I know people that can get away and like pick up some random like $20 Walmart shoe and they'll be fine. And that's cool. Like if you can, like more power to you. But like for the most part, like most of us can't operate like that.
Yeah. And you'll know too, like, so I know our students like budget conscious is really important. When somebody asked the question of like, what is run gear? Right. And like, if you look at behind Greg, there's like all this stuff and some of it is like familiar to you. And some of it, like he just presented like 4 different types of shoes. So you're like, man, that's like $400 right there. Like between my road trail.
Yeah.
So I, want to just emphasize that you'll feel it in your body when you need to invest in proper equipment. So like, I know when I started running, I ran in high school, but not because I wanted to, because my mom would just like force me to run with her on the weekends. But then when I became a runner in like my early like mid 20s, um, I started off with just like a pair of New Balances and like felt that was fine. And then as I slowly got into longer distance running, I realized, okay, I need other things to go with that. So for the mileage you guys are doing on the run challenge, and Iman mentioned she's a minimalist runner. So she doesn't really carry a bunch of stuff or needs a bunch of things to do this. This is the most accessible sport. Um, too outside, like there's other sports out there, but I would say running is probably the most accessible. Would you agree, Greg? Anyone?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but you could definitely just step out your front door and go for a run, which is kind of nice. And then San Diego, for the most part, is a pretty runnable city. Don't have enough street lights, but it's other than that, during the day, it's pretty runnable. Question about socks.
Yes, socks.
So also, I'll speak really quickly to like running shoes and the difference between like pretty much all other shoes is, I mean, you can go on a running website and they will geek out about every single detail. And that's like the big difference. It's like running shoes. There's so much thought that is put into like the fit, the arch fit, like the material, how deep, like an instep a person's going to have, how you don't want the tongue to shift around. Like there's so many things that go into a running shoe versus like a cross trainer, or just like a casual shoe. So the technology in a shoe is like, in a running shoe truly is worth it because there's so much thought. And like, if we get a shoe that's returned to us, literally I have to write down a reason why it was returned. And if that company gets that complaint enough, they will switch it for the next season. And a lot of times they'll even switch it 6 months into a production. They'll do it very quickly. Even there's an example like Ultra, we were supposed to get one of their shoes this last month, and they opened up the boxes and it was like something was like wrong with just like a handful of them, and they're like sending them all back and they're redoing the entire line because having a good quality product is so important in the running industry. Because if you don't put one out, by like some other brand is gonna like surpass you in sales easily. It's so competitive. So it's good quality stuff.
Can
Socks.
Oh
Yeah.
wait, before we move on to like other gear, can you just quickly talk about insoles? Because I feel like that's a thing that people come into the store. Maybe they were upsold by another store and you don't really understand their relationship with insoles, but they feel like they ought to have it.
Definitely. So I'll say first off, and this is not to like talk about any other store in particular or anything like that, but like I'll say one of the things that we take the most pride in at our store and what I'm like super happy about is like we don't upsell you in anything. If you come in, you're like, hey, ideally I'd like to spend like 70 to $100, then we'll try to find sales shoes for you. Like if you have a budget, like we will never try to upsell you in anything that you don't need, especially like we'll just try to like, usually we talk you out of things, and I'm like notorious for that. It's like looking at someone's shoes, like, no, you don't need to replace these at all. Like go home. But like insoles are for sure. A lot of running stores will kind of sell you a pair of insoles with every single pair of shoes, and running shoes are expensive, and it's for a reason, and it's because they're meant to fit right off the bat. So typically you should not need an insole on top of getting like a brand new pair of running shoes. If you're having certain issues like arch pain or plantar fasciitis or like Achilles issues, like sometimes getting a little bit of an insert will definitely help with that. But for the most part, like you don't need inserts. I will say I do wear orthotics in all of my casual shoes because they're so flat and like Vans and stuff like that. So I will put orthotics in those. But in terms of running, like if you get a proper shoe, you shouldn't need anything on top of it.
Greg, before we move on, I missed a question on speed workouts and shoes. Do you need a separate type of shoe for speed workouts?
Depends how fast you're trying to go. For me, absolutely. I love, if I'm running on the track, then I will definitely put on something like super thin, super firm, just so you spend less time on the ground. If you get something super cushiony, typically you're spending more time on the ground and it's like less time in the air. So if you have the means, like by all means, I would recommend like a few different styles of shoes. And so definitely have like my super fast shoes for track workouts or like 5K, 10Ks. And then I'll have my clunky, slow training shoes and then race day shoes. It's my problem.
Thank you. Well, that's why you're in the industry that you're in.
But if you can, like, it's really beneficial to have multiple shoes for different types of workouts, for sure. Yeah.
Mhm. What about socks?
Socks
So-
are huge.
Mhm.
And so I'll use myself as an example. When I was in high school, I used to wear these what I thought were cool, crew length, like calf length, Nike socks. And every time I would run a race, I would have huge, like, silver dollar blisters on the bottom of my feet. And I just thought that was part of running. And I just kind of dealt with it for literally like all 4 years. And then I found out that it's because they had like 15% cotton. So the name of the game is do not wear cotton in anything athletic. And that's because cotton will retain moisture, which will cause friction, which can lead to blistering. On top of that, cotton retains odor. So if your feet stink, it's probably because you're wearing cotton socks. So try to wear like a tri-blend. I always like to use, this is one of my favorite brands. These are Stance. Not only are they cool, they're actually like, there's something to them. So they usually use a tri-blend of like a poly lycra nylon blend. But yeah, don't wear cotton.
Thank you for that. So like, again, keep the questions coming. I'm sorry if I missed a question that you have.
I think one of the questions that like was asked on the spreadsheet was what type of clothes should I wear? Like, can I run in sweats? And what to wear during the winter to keep me warm but not overheat.
I ran in sweats like 2 days ago. I'm not even gonna lie. But it
Was you
very-
rolled out of bed? You rolled out of bed. You're in your pajamas is what I meant.
I was like,
Thank you,
I just have to get this in between my meeting, and like I just like I need to like I was still in my pajamas. I'm not
I
gonna lie.
wouldn't even make it a black. I
Yeah.
wouldn't heat.
I mean, Mona just ruined my whole my next statement.
Sorry.
Don't wear sweats. No, I mean, obviously like, tights and like different kind of like running sweats, but if you wear cotton sweats, same thing. It's just gonna bog you down. It doesn't wick away the moisture, which is gonna be the biggest thing. And I will be honest, like throughout high school and college and in college, like I was lucky enough to like have like run out of school that had sponsorships, but I was still like super hard nosed where I was like, hey, I'm gonna wear cotton. I don't even care. I don't need a tech tee. And then like all my like sleeves would get super long. It would get like dragged down from like all the heavy from all my sweat. And it would just like retain all the water. So get that tech material. It'll wick away the moisture. There's some stuff out there that's like flash dry. You won't even sweat up. Like it'll just wick away the moisture immediately. It's so nice. So I would definitely look into that stuff. And like, obviously I'd love for you guys to shop here, but like you can get some really good stuff at like, even like Nordstrom's Rack, to be honest. And like what we sell here will be very similar to what's sold at like typical athletic stores. So, yeah.
I will add, no one's really addressed this, but I will speak for women. Women, invest in a good sports bra. Don't get the
I agree.
crappy Target $12 one. It's not worth it. If you have the ability to like scour the sales, if money is like an issue, I know you guys are on student budgets, but put the money towards a good sports bra because women do chafe in different places than men. And then just also the bounce factor and just making sure that you're supported because like shoes, you want to feel comfortable in your feet as like with shoes, but also with your entire body. You want to feel comfortable and supported. So
yeah, definitely the
that.
second most important thing for women, for sure.
Yeah, and there's like so I learned after training for a half marathon what glide was. So even with, I just want to emphasize, like even with the sweat wicking and the right material, you can still chafe. So I learned that the hard way after running like a longer distance, and I chafed all along the bra line.
People of all shapes and sizes.
hurts.
A lot of times we'll get people in here and they'll consider themselves bigger. They're like, oh, you probably don't experience this, like chafing. Like everybody
chafes.
Everybody chafes.
And when you find out is when you take a shower, and that's not when you want
And
to.
it stings.
It hurts. But yes, the Body Glide is definitely a game changer.
Fellas, nipple chafing is real. And if you're at the end of like a half or full marathon, you'll see a ton of guys with like bloody nipples, and it's because they didn't put any kind of body glide. So that's like a real painful situation. So
I've seen guys with like pasties, like, or is that a thing?
those are the guys that have already they're already past that point. They've already like chafed their nipples and they're not healing, so they have to put on pasties.
Okay.
But if you put on body glide, or
there's some faces on here. It's just kind of funny.
Once you run past like
Really?
7 or 8 miles, guys, like that's when you experience bloody 11s.
Mhm.
Can we? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say someone brought up cold stuff and
Yeah.
not eating.
Yeah.
Okay. So I will say we do carry some sweet cold weather gear. So I'll just show this like Nike long sleeve. And it's called a thermopolis. And what they do is inside is perforated. And what this does is it's allows the heat to escape, but also helps the heat travel. So it'll definitely keep you really nice and warm. On top of it, it has built-in mittens. So this right here folds over and it can cover your hands, and also has thumb holes. So it's like super useful. But I'm also a person that gets like super, super hot. So this is like for that person, like when you wake up in the morning and it's really cold, San Diego cold, this is really nice. Or just like cruising around town. The other thing that's super popular, if you like, I like to run in a tee, but then if I wear like a super long sleeve or like a jacket, I'll heat up. But like wearing arm sleeves, it's really, really nice. Because then you could still just wear like a nice thin tee. Also, this provides sun protection as well. So these actually do really well during the summertime when people are out running in the desert and things like that. They'll kind of come pick up arm sleeves, believe it or not. And then if you're also running with a jacket, one thing to consider, so this is like a windbreaker. But so this is the front, and on the back, if you are worried about overheating, you want to make sure that a jacket has like big open panels in the back so that your body heat can escape. That's something that a lot of times people won't consider. So if you wear a jacket, you're like, I heat up immediately. You want to look for something that has these huge, huge panels so that air can escape. A lot of ski jackets have done a really good job with stuff like that. But
Yeah. And I know this sounds like it does start to get costly, but honestly, like I've had my run gear for a decade and I'm still using it. So like a lot of the sports tech material is so durable that it's worth the extra $10 to just buy that shirt because it will last you. And even with all the washes that it's gone through. So Greg, we have a question. Is spandex a good material to run in?
yeah, for sure. You know, it's funny. I have these, and a lot of times it's the same thing. You kind of want a compression, like a compression tight. This is what I ran in these this morning. These are 2XU, and it kind of doubles as like warmth, and then also prevents chafing. If you get like a really nice compression, like this is a brand called 2XU. It also helps with like muscle containment, so it'll help prevent like soreness, help you recover faster, can prevent cramping. So there's a lot of benefits if you go with like a really nice compression tight. But if not, if you just wear tights, then it'll definitely benefit you and prevent chafing at minimum. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. So we have about like 5 minutes. Does anyone have any questions for Greg or Iman or about the run challenge? I'm just kind of leaving it up to the floor at this point, unless you have something else, Iman.
Somebody did ask about like roller recovery in the Theragun.
Okay.
Yeah, so maybe you want to explain what that is. That's like a thing that's been popular. It's been popping up in my Instagram feed. The Hypervolt is another one.
Yeah, so recovery is going to be super important. I'll just say, if you want to avoid any kind of massage stuff, let's say you do like a 5-mile tempo run or like hard run, and you're sore the next morning. Like I would definitely recommend it for recovery, like either going out and like just doing like a really slow jog, however far, like maybe a couple miles, or even just going out and walking. That's usually what I'll do is like, I'll do a long run Saturdays, and then Sundays, I'll just kind of do all my errands and just walk around the city versus like getting in my car. Then that'll be my recovery. In terms of equipment, this is the creme de la creme. So this is the Hypervolt. you'll see a ton of these out in the market. It's kind of like a massager, not kind of, it is a massager. But these things are awesome. The benefit of these is you actually use it. They are typically a little bit pricier, but you can find a lot of them, like random third-party ones. And the big difference is this one, like if you go high end, typically they're just super quiet. If you do not, a lot of times they use a jigsaw engine, so it'll be like really, really loud. And that's the difference. Quality typically, is in terms of like massaging, it's probably about the same. It's just the sound. And at first we had one that was like super loud and we sold in the store. I was like, it's not that big of a deal. And then it was like kind of getting embarrassing, where it's like, this is like nice and quiet. It's kind of cool. But there's a ton of this stuff on the market. Theragun, Hypervolt, or yeah.
Hypervolt.
Yeah, foam rolling, super important. I personally, I it's one of those things like here at the store, we can tell you to do that a million times. Iman, how many times have you foam rolled this year?
I hate foam rolling.
Yeah. And that's the hard part. Like no one likes to foam roll.
It hurts.
I've got 3 foam rollers
week.
staring at me.
Yeah, I got like 3 foam rollers at home, and literally they just kind of like sit in the corner. Like they don't really get too much use. So they do have its place for sure. They are 100% beneficial, but it's truly hard to kind of get into that habit of foam rolling.
But
do it.
But do it.
Yeah, definitely do it. Is the fitting, so there was a question, is the fitting that was mentioned at the beginning the same as a gait analysis, or are there 2 different things?
Good question.
Yep. Yeah, it's the same thing. And we kind of like lump it all together. And you could do shoe fitting and just like have us measure feet. But shoe fitting, gait analysis just sounds super fancy. But yeah, it's just us looking at the way you move in your foot mechanics.
In the neutral shoe.
Yeah. In a neutral shoe. And that's the other thing too. A lot of times you'll go to other stores and they'll have you run barefoot, which sounds nice, but running barefoot will completely change your foot mechanics. And a lot of times the integrity of a shoe is plenty of support. So when we see people who come into our store who had their gait analyzed barefoot, a lot of times they're too supportive of a shoe because they're not, that store is typically not considering like the shoe itself being supportive. Yeah.
Cool. So we've got like 2 more minutes left. If no one has a question, I will say, this is going to be a shameless plug, but it ties everything in. So my company, The Rundown, we're doing a challenge, Rediscover Balboa Park. It's a 3-mile audio run tour, run adventure. So one of the prizes, it's a raffle every week. You can win $150 to Milestone for some shoes, is one of the prizes. So that could be an incentive for you. The chances are really good. So if you want to explore that route, that gamify it, also possibly winning a prize to Milestone. So
yeah. And if you are completing this week's challenge, we are giving away 27 $15 gift cards. So 4 groups will win, and then 15 of you will get a $15 gift card to Milestone to get you started. Natalie wants to know where she signs up, Iman. So Iman just put on the chat, the rundown.run is the website. So check that out. You can, is there a form or anything, Iman, that they need to do?
it's a web-based app. So go to the rundown.run, put down your information. You'll get an email with a code. So that will then give you access to the app. The app, then you can save to your home screen and operate it like an app. From the app, you can go to the challenge, which is on the home screen. It'll take you to the challenge, and then it will give you the instructions about how to enter and where to start. And they're just cues about the clues and the facts, and it just leads you throughout Balboa Park. So that's where you sign up. So take a picture of like maybe your most favorite thing that you saw on the route, upload it through the app, and then on Monday is when we announce who the winners are. So you have like this challenge, you have to the end of this week to complete it for this particular round.
All right,
Challenges are
y'all.
fun.
Thank you so much for joining. Again, I hope that, we gave you some pretty good information. Thank you so much, Greg, for speaking to this group and introducing your store. Again, y'all, you have a lot of choices out there, but do try to support, if not Milestone, at least a local run shop. Shop local, small business if you can. And just know that if you are in San Diego, Milestone is there as a resource. They have an amazing community. I met Iman at Milestone while I was shopping for shoes.
Yeah.
So I was injured, by the way. So this is the ripple effect of what I think Greg and Chad have built for San Diego. And I would say, on a really, really important note, Milestone is incredibly inclusive. It is probably one of the most diverse groups I've ever seen in the active community, not just in the run community. I was raised in San Diego, been a part of the active community all my life. And I would say that was one of the things that attracted me, even though Milestone is really far from where I live. It was one of the things that attracted me to that run club, is that the people were just super cool. We all came from different backgrounds, didn't matter your age, and different levels. So it was incredibly inclusive, as opposed to where wellness and being active can feel very exclusive. So I hope that you do get a chance to check them out and do support them. So